Oh, welcome. Come on in out of the rain. I am always glad to see you. Would you care for some enchanted elderberry shortbread still warm from the oven? I had some elderflowers and berries left over from a light, mild exorcism earlier. It's perfect for unwanted spirits. Oh, here's Cleopatra come to say hello. She missed you. Now you two make yourselves comfortable while I share some new strange stories here on Madame Strangeways. Story number 1 by Sean. My story takes place when I was in kindergarten, about 5 or 6 years old, I would guess. I'll preface my story by explaining a little about my family's life situation at the time. We didn't have a lot of money. My mom worked 2 jobs, and my dad had a full-time job when he was in college, working on his nursing degree. Because they were so busy, my sister and I spent a lot of time with my great-grandmother, Granny, and her husband, Jim, who took care of us while my parents were out grinding the American dream. Since we spent so much time together, we became very close to them, and I specifically became close to Jim. Though he wasn't my biological grandfather, he still treated me like I was his grandson. Better even, if I'm being honest. More like a son. We did a lot together, and I was pretty attached to him. Unfortunately, at some point during my kindergarten year, Jim had a heart attack. My only real memory of the day it happened was the whole family in the parking lot of the hospital, waiting for news on how he was doing. It sounds like an odd place to wait, but it was the early 90s and everyone still smoked. Sadly, we didn't have to wait long before we got the sad news that he had passed away. Here is where the weird part of the story begins. It's evident now that his death had a big effect on me. The events that followed that night I had completely pushed out of my memories until about 5 or so years ago, when it came up in conversation during a family get-together. It was a very stomach-dropping memory unlock moment for me, with all of the events flooding back into my mind. As it turns out, my mental state after his death was very depressed. I would randomly start crying and asking for Jim. I missed him a lot, apparently. My parents figured it would pass with time, as most things do. But things got weird for me. And this part I still don't actually remember completely, but my parents said they would be woken up by me laughing out in the hallways of our house or just talking sometimes. When they asked me what I was doing out of bed, I would tell them, Jim woke me up so we could play together. For a few weeks, apparently not every night, but often, the same thing would happen. They would wake up and find me playing in the halls with Jim in the early hours of the morning. It didn't take long before my parents made use of my school counselor, and these are the memories that are very vivid now that it was brought back up. I would spend probably an hour or so each day with her talking about Jim and my feelings. I remember trying to express how I felt while using one of those old-school sand zen gardens that you run the little rakes through, or some other small fidgety toy to help keep me calm while we spoke about it. This probably persisted for about 2 or 3 months if I had to guess, but I can't be sure. I suppose it worked, talking it all out with the counselor. Maybe too well, since I was able to purge it from my memory for 20+ years. To this day, I keep a piece of him with me always. My granny passed his wedding ring on to me when I was older, as I was the closest thing to a son that he had. So I wear it with pride and love as a memento to him. Still, though, since I've remembered it all, it has me wondering if it was all just an odd, extreme coping mechanism, or if there is such a thing as ghosts or maybe angels. Was it all in my head, or were we that close that Jim didn't want me to feel how I was feeling, so he wanted to help me through it? Who knows? Sean, thank you so much for sharing that story with me about what a creepy little child that you were. I mean, you had your reasons. You had very valid reasons for being a creepy kid. I'm so sorry that you lost Jim the way that you did and that you didn't have more time with him, although it sounds like you were getting some extra quality time with him at night, playing with him in the hallway. I'm also happy that you got your ring from your granny to remember him by. I think that's super sweet. Of course, you blocked that out of your memory. I think that's understandable. And it sounds like, along with the counseling that you were getting, and obviously the love and support of your family, that maybe that combined with the peace that seeing Jim a few more times, well, probably more than a few more times, the peace that continuing to see Jim now and again after losing him sounds like that brought you a lot of closure as a tiny baby Sean. Whether or not that is actually his spirit visiting you or an angel, like you said, whatever it was, it brought you comfort and it did what it needed to do and it served its purpose. I cannot imagine being one of your parents, waking up like, oh, there's little tiny Sean again, talking to his recently deceased surrogate grandfather. No big deal. Something about the sound of children laughing at times and places in which they should not be laughing. There's just something about that that's incredibly creepy. But thank you so much for being vulnerable enough to share that sweet memory that you only recently remembered. So thank you so much for sharing that with us. If anyone has a similar story that they would also like to share, please feel free. Send it to madamestrangeways@gmail.com or submit it on madamestrangeways.com. That's MADAME. The Poop Ghost in the Woods by Nicholas Kaminski. Early in my career, I taught music at a private school in New Jersey. One of my favorite things to do when I worked there was to go on field trips. I always signed up to chaperone them. One trip that I insisted on going on every year was for the 6th graders in September to a camp in the woods in Connecticut. The camp was all about sustainability and had great farm-to-table food, plus there was hiking and kayaking. Really a great time. However, it was also most of these kids' first time sleeping away from home. Some took the opportunity for unsupervised mischief at night. Some brought out the tears and begged to be brought home. My last year there, I was staying in a cabin I had not been in before. The layout of the small building was 4 bedrooms arranged in a square, each with an entrance door to the outside wraparound porch and each with their own bathroom. There was also a heavy door with an old-school iron slide lock conjoining my bedroom with one other. The cabin was pretty old, and I remember being surprised that I didn't sense any spirits in my room. It felt remarkably unoccupied. So we had our first day of activities and sent the kids to bed. I had a pair of known troublemakers in other bedrooms of my cabin, but I didn't have any problems with them at night. However, the next morning, I went to wake everyone up, and the boys in the room that happens to connect to mine, I kept the heavy bolt locked on my side, complained of not being able to sleep because the boys in the room next to them wouldn't quit banging on their bathroom wall at night. Of course, that was the room with the troublemakers, so I admonished them for being annoying, but they swore they didn't do it. The kids who couldn't sleep were very upset, though, so I didn't believe the troublemakers. Later on in the early evening, the kids were on a long hike with the camp staff, and us chaperones were given a few hours off. The science teacher and guidance counselor went to the main lodge to watch some movie, while I was feeling a little sleepy, so I went back to my cabin, about a quarter mile through the woods from the lodge, to take a nap. When I got to the cabin, I heard an alarm going off. Realizing it was in the adjoining room to mine, the room where the kids couldn't sleep, I knew I wouldn't be able to nap with that going off, so I opened their door to turn it off. As soon as I entered the room, the alarm immediately stopped. I was also met with some of the most oppressive energy I've ever felt. The room was way darker than mine, and also way colder. The rooms didn't have individual thermostats either. That was controlled for the whole cabin. This room was bad news. I closed the door and walked around the porch to my blissfully pure room and take off my jeans to get into bed. Though before I settle in all the way for my nap, I decide to poop. I go to my bathroom, and right as I was about to sit down on the toilet, a very large black spider crawls over the seat and then under it. I immediately flipped the seat up to kill it, but it was just gone. Thinking that maybe I just missed it crawling under the rim of the bowl and not wanting to find out where it had gone mid-poop, I decided to just use the bathroom in the adjoining bedroom. The kids were going to be out for hours. I was fine. Being lazy and not wanting to put my pants back on, I decided to use the heavy door with the iron slide lock to get into their bedroom instead of walking across the porch. The door was heavy and old. It hung a bit against the lock. I had to lean against the door to give the lock room to slide. Once it was open, I stepped into the familiar dark and cold bedroom with the bad vibes and went to its bathroom to poop. As soon as I sit down on the toilet, I hear a banging on the wall behind me. My first reaction is to get mad at my troublemaker students because here they are having lied to me about banging on the wall, and now I've caught them. But then I remember they aren't here. They're up on the side of a mountain on a 5-hour hike. I am alone in the cabin. Or so I thought. I start to try to find a rational explanation for the banging. It only started when I sat down, so maybe the pipes in the toilet are loose and move around when you sit. So I wiggle about, trying to correlate any of my movements with the bangs I'm still hearing. Nothing. The bangs were definitely not connected to anything I was doing. That's when I put it all together. This was the banging on the bathroom wall that the kids were complaining about. The alarm clock and spider seemed to both lure me into this other room. The coldness, the darkness, the oppressive energy. There was something malevolent in this room, and it wanted me there. And before I managed to actually poop, I run from the bathroom, through the heavy door, back into my room, and go to close the slide lock. To do so, I need to press all of my weight on the door. That's when something on the other side of the door pushes it so hard, I'm knocked back. This is again while I was putting all of my weight against it. I was not a small man at the time either. I was 5'11", 260 pounds. I panic. My shoulder hurts from the force of the push, but I manage to slam the door shut, get the lock slid back into place, and run out the front door of my bedroom, grabbing my shoes and jeans in the process. I whip them on in the porch and then sprint back to the lodge. Out of breath, I meet up with the science teacher and guidance counselor and tell them everything that happened. Frustratingly, the guidance counselor doesn't believe me, but the science teacher does. Either way, I stay with them until the kids get back from their hike. We have our closing program for the day, and I lead my group through the woods back to the cabin. I, of course, do not mention the thing that pushed me to the kids, but I do apologize to the troublemakers for admonishing them in the morning. I know it wasn't you, I say. They look at me a little puzzled. I don't know if a teacher ever admitted they were wrong to them before just saying, "Okay, Mr. Kaminski, thanks," and go to bed. Once I'm sure all of them are safely in their rooms, or as safe as they might be, I settled into my room. I'm a little uneasy, but I feel like maybe this room is a safe place. Whatever resides in this cabin in the woods is confined to that dark room on the other side of the wall. But not wanting to be alone in that moment, I call my girlfriend to chat a bit before bed. I tell her the story about my shitty encounter that day, and she just laughs at me. She doesn't believe that kind of stuff, and she thought the image of me waddling away from a ghost with my pants around my ankles was truly hilarious. I remind her that I wasn't wearing pants at the time, but that doesn't stop her laughing, and it's honestly contagious. It was nice to laugh about something that had scared me so much. However, maybe I shouldn't have acknowledged the spirit's existence aloud while on the phone in that room, because suddenly I watch as the wardrobe in the room has its doors flung open with a very loud bang. I'm frozen in place on the bed, just staring at the wardrobe, waiting for any more movement. The room is still. I hadn't placed anything in that wardrobe the entire weekend. Nothing fell out of it to open the doors like that. It was just empty. Terrified, I slept with the lights on that night. Okay, I don't know about anyone else, but my two big questions that I have at the end of this story. Number one, where did that spider go? Was it a real spider? Was it a ghost spider? Was it actually summoned? This is all one question. Okay, hold on. I'm getting to number two. Number one, where did that giant spider go? And how do the worst insects just disappear like that? They're just gone in the blink of an eye. I don't understand how physics works around them. I hate it. So number one, spider. Number two, did you actually get to poop that day? Because it sounds like no, which can't be good for your bowels or your guts. You know, it's important that we keep a regular schedule, everybody. So make sure you're eating both insoluble and soluble fiber. You can do a quick little Google search, figure out the difference between those two, but they're both important for gut health. So, Nicholas, I am so sorry that this happened to you, but you also understand that it's funny, even though it sounds terrifying, and I would never, ever want to have anything like this happen to me. I'm with your girlfriend I would be right there with her, laughing at your pain and suffering. I do feel like you're onto something, though, that as soon as you start talking about it in the room, now your haunted wardrobe that had previously been not haunted now swinging its doors open and, scaring the life out of you. And what a good job that entity did luring you into that other bathroom. It said, I know exactly how to get this guy into my web of demonic mischief. I will mess with his toilet time. That's what I'll do. He's gonna have to poop eventually. So let's just mess with that. I find that very sophisticated. And good for you for not letting on to the kids what you experienced, because I can only imagine the chaos that would cause for them to hear from a chaperone that there is a haunting in the cabin. I'm really curious if this is something that occurred before or after. Like, is this an anomaly, or is this a known situation that happens year after year at the camp? Or possibly it only ever happens on certain anniversaries of spooky things, like some kind of urban legend that you would hear at a summer camp, for instance. Thank you again, Nicholas. Your stories are always a delight to read, even if they were horrifying for you at the time. If anyone else has a summer camp story or anything similar to this story, any thoughts or theories, please go ahead, email them to madamestrangeways@gmail.com or go to madamestrangeways.com. And again, MADAME. Now, remember, you can feel afraid and not be in danger. Thank you for listening.